All right, welcome back, everybody, to part two. And I thank y'all for joining me again, especially if you watch part one. If you haven't watched part one, I suggest you go to part one first. So everybody, welcome back to part two. And let me hit you with some more facts. We're going to get right back into it, y'all. Deforestation rates in Africa are twice the average for the rest of the world, with more than 4 million hectare-acres of primary forest disappearing every year. That's something to think about, y'all. I just told y'all the highest concentration of trees are in Africa. This explains why more than 4 million, not acres, y'all, but more than 4 million hectare acres of primary forest are disappearing from our motherland every year. Now, how many of y'all care about it? I keep telling you, as Africa go, we all go. So it's time to stand up, people. Let's move on. Countries like Kenya, Malawi, Zambia have 1 through 5% of the primary forest remaining. Countries like Kenya, Malawi, and Zambia have 1 through 5% of the primary forest remaining. Forests used to cover over 20% of Africa's 30 million square kilometers, with almost all currently being destroyed and degraded by commercial and subsistence logging, as well as land conversion to plantations, agriculture, mines, roads, and settlements. Soak that in for a minute, people. Forests used to cover 20% of the land. 20%, people. Now they all being destroyed at a rate of 4 million hectare acres per year. This is amazing, people. Let's move on. 60% of the tropical forests in the Congo Basin are considered commercially exploitable. Y'all don't know where AIDS started at? Y'all ain't starting to put these puzzle pieces together yet? Let me read that again to you. 60% of the tropical forests in the Congo Basin are considered commercially exploitable. And this is where AIDS started at, y'all. AIDS started in the Congo. And let me give you something else to blow your mind. For you slow people, if you're still scratching your head, listen to what I'm going to tell you here. When they found out that the Congo, when these people found out that 60% of the tropical forest in the Congo was commercially exploitable, that's when AIDS appeared in the Congo. Now, people, how was they going to exploit this land for commercial profit if the people weren't going to allow them to do it? When they went over there trying to exploit the Congo to get these commercial profits, them people weren't having that. So what did they have to do? They had to do like Monsanto did, create a problem so they can then create the solution. In other words, them people don't need us, but we need them. This is these big business. This is how they think. They say, hey, man, we need them rainforests in the Congo, but them people don't need us. So what they have to do is make them people need them. Now, how do they do that? They create a disease and put it into the people, and they the ones with the only people with the treatment. So now y'all need some from us too, just like we want to exploit y'all jungle. If you want your treatment for this disease I just gave you, now you got to let me commercially exploit your land. This is what's happening, y'all. This is called colonization, colonialism. You create the problem so you can create the solution. So that's how your AIDS was a tool for war, y'all. Listen, in war, you shoot guns, you drop missiles, and there's also a form of war people call biological warfare, where governments drop diseases on people. A lot of these diseases that people get in today were government weapons, y'all. So AIDS come as a result of them trying to commercially exploit the Congo area. And it spread it throughout the continent as they needed it to exploit other areas. And you can see that it's making the medical industry millions of dollars here in America, so they exploiting the whole planet. Now let's move on. 6 of the top 10 countries with the largest annual net loss of forested area are in Africa. Wow. 6 of the top 10 countries, y'all. That's in Africa. Say 6 of the top 10 countries. That's deep stuff. Check this fact out. Over 1,270 large dams have been built along the continent's many rivers. And we wonder why them people can't get no good water over there. It ain't that it ain't no water over there. If you think ain't no water over there, you a food. Plenty of water over there. The problem is people controlling the water. I just read to you 1,270 dams have been built along the continent's many rivers. What you think will happen if they destroy all them dams? You think people will still be thirsty for water? Y'all better wake up, people. It ain't hard to see now. It say Africa has 8 of the 11 major biomes and the largest remaining populations of lion, elephant, rhinoceros, cheetah, hyena, leopard, and hundreds of other species. So basically, what did we just read here? That most of your main species on the planet, Africa, all right, has the last remaining of those species, y'all, including the human species, y'all, because the oldest human species, the last remaining, can be found here. This is proof that all life come from this continent. So for you Negroes, like I said, who want to believe that you Irish and you Greek, just think about what I just said. Irish and Greek weren't always on this planet, but Africa has always been here. These nations that you want to identify with, they Johnny come lately. Listen to this stuff that I'm reading to you here. The history of this land go back to over 200,000 years. So that means everybody is African. In other words, y'all, being African is just like being human. There's a lake in Africa called Lake Malawi, and it has more fish species than any other freshwater system on Earth. What does that tell you? Why do we see the largest number of species concentration here and the most diversity of the species physical variations here? This proves that everything started here, people. How much more do I got to read? It's a lake in Africa called Lake Malawi that has more fish species than any other freshwater system on the planet. Come on, y'all. This is truly the Holy Land. I want somebody who, for you people who think Jerusalem and all of that is the Holy Land, pull up me some facts like I'm doing about Africa and pull them up about Jerusalem, and let's see who got the most resources. Let's see who got the most history. Let's see which continent is the most special one. After everything I'm reading to you, it'll take a fool to disagree that the motherland ain't the Holy Land. How can it be the motherland but not be the Holy Land? Somebody fooling you like that dried up desert is a Holy Land, and I'm showing you all of this life over here on Africa, all of these resources and stuff. Gotta be a fool, man. Africa has over 85% of the world's elephants. Man, that is deep, y'all. That is deep. Africa has 85% of all the elephants in the world, y'all. They live in Africa. That means 85% of all the elephants on the planet live in Africa. So that's proof that elephants originated in Africa. And I just proved to you that every other living species did also. But I'm going to keep going with these facts, y'all. Stay with me. So Africa has over 85% of the world's elephants, and over 99% of the remaining lions are on the African continent. Did you hear what I just said, y'all? 99% of all the remaining lions in the world are on the African continent, y'all. That's deep. Think about that for a minute. How you gonna tell me this ain't the motherland where all life started at? Come on now, people. Listen to these facts. Research them yourself. Look, it say Africa has over 25% of the world's bird species. I can keep going, y'all. I just told you about the elephants and the lions. Now it's telling you it's got over 25% of the world's bird species. I told you in the earlier part of the video in part 1 about the other species and different variations. So this is proof that this is the motherland. This is it, y'all. This is where we all come from, including all the animals, all the fish, all the plants. All of that stuff originated here, y'all, because at one point it was all one big land mass, and all these other continents broke off from the mother, and they carried a little bit of that life with them, y'all, as they floated away through over the thousands and thousands of years as they floated away from Africa. But most of the life stayed right there in the heart of the earth, right there on the motherland, and we can prove it today when you listen to these facts. So let's take a minute to reflect right quick about all of this, y'all, and let me give y'all something to think about. There's something very special, man, about the continent of Africa when you consider all these facts. We can't get this type of information out of any other continent on the planet. When you begin to study Africa, you realize where it all started, people. So to embrace Africa is to embrace your true spirituality, your true identity, who we really are, people. To embrace Africa is to embrace the planet and take care of the planet. Why? Because all of our resources is here. You see, when I tell people, let's go back to Africa, I'm not talking about getting on the plane flying over there. I'm talking about going back to our African ways of thinking and our African ways of loving and respecting one another, our African practices of ma'at and taking care of the planet. Once we do that, y'all, all the confusion you see in religion will cease to exist. But I ain't trying to get off subject. Let's get back to the facts on Africa, y'all. It say, check this out, y'all. This gonna blow y'all mind right here. Egypt is the most popular tourist destination in Africa, attracting around 10 million visitors per year. And they telling us to go to the Bahamas, y'all. It's clear they trying to hide something from us, people. Come on, wake up, y'all. So let's throw something else out there about Pangea and its relationship with all of this. So we know that all of these continents was one continent at one point and they broke off from Africa. So with that being said, what a lot of people don't realize when we talk about Pangea is that all of these other continents and countries, guess what, y'all? They big floating islands. If you started drilling in the ground, you would eventually hit water in all of these other continents. But what am I telling you about Africa? The African continent has not moved much from its original position in the supercontinent Pangea. So what do we say? Africa has no water beneath it. Africa is the original rock from which the earth was birthed from, y'all. In other words, put it this way. When the earth was forming, it had water, it had earth, fire, and wind. But during the cooling period of the earth, y'all, those elements weren't in the forms we see today. The water was vapor. The earth was magma. The earth had to cool off, y'all. So when the earth cooled off, y'all, and all of these elements settled to form the planet, what we call continents was all of the rock. All right. Remember what I just told you. Earth is 4 elements: fire, wind, water, and earth, which is the rock. All of the rock that you see on earth in the beginning was one big chunk, y'all. It was one big chunk. Now, what happened over time, that one big chunk started breaking up. And guess what? The last thing that we see today from that one big chunk of rock is Africa. So Africa is mounted to the core of the earth. It is essentially the rock that birthed all of the other continents, so to speak. So if you take a nice sized rock right now and fill up a mop bucket and put that rock inside of the mop bucket, you can use that little experiment to see about Pangea. The world was pretty much all water. The only land you had was this huge supercontinent called Pangea. Now, through years and years of earthquakes, the world became to look how you see it today. But the last remaining piece of Pangea is Africa, y'all. It's the only piece that when this big rock broke up, it didn't never move, y'all. The rest of them floated off. So now you can start researching that on yourself. And for people who's skeptical about Pangea, this is my experiment that I challenge you to do. Look at a globe and a map, and I want y'all to put all the continents back together like a puzzle piece and see if they don't fit right back, connect right back to Africa like a puzzle piece. That experiment proves that everything I'm saying is true regarding Pangea. Now let's move on. We know that Africa is the birthplace of the human species, but this is what we don't know about that. The scientist Charles Darwin was the first to suggest that the ancestors of human beings originated in Africa. However, prejudicial attitudes toward the continent made many people in the Western world highly resistant resistant to the idea until well into the 20th century. What did we just read right there, y'all? For hundreds and hundreds of years, y'all, for a long time, for many, many years, y'all, scientists knew that life started in Africa, but they did not put it out there. They didn't teach it because people were so racist toward Africa. But now people are so desperate for the truth that we can't deny it anymore. So we see science taking a turn today and bringing up a lot of facts that we hadn't always known about the continent. So let's move on. Here's another fact that you need to know about Africans. In 1974, the skeleton of Lucy, a hominid who lived approximately 3.2 million years ago. I'm going to stop because I don't want to lose y'all. You're going to miss what I just said. I'm going to read that again if you didn't hear it. Lucy, a hominid who lived approximately 3.2 million years ago and has been considered a common ancestor to the human family, was discovered in Ethiopia. We talking about, y'all, a skeleton that's 3.2 million years old was found in Ethiopia. And here come the Bibles and all of the religions then start to 7,000, 6,000 years ago. And these people go back 3.2 million years in harmony, in love with the planet. And here come these religions coming 7,000 years ago, got us in war and confused, hating one another. But I'm going to move on, y'all. Let's get some more facts about Africa. In 1979, a 165-foot trail of the earliest hominid footprints was discovered in the Kibish region of Tanzania. The two discoveries indisputably marks northeastern Africa as the birthplace of humanity. And can't nobody argue with that. Everybody know Africa is the birthplace of humanity. And you got Negroes coming around here talking about I originated from Ireland. See, the Europeans laugh at y'all when they hear that because they say to themselves, boy, we did a good job on them Negroes. Now you got to start researching this stuff to see who you really are, people. We Africans. The whole world is Africans. And that's a rich, respected history. And the more I learn about Africa, y'all, I tell you, the better I feel about myself every day. I don't have to identify with no false identity, and lie to myself like I'm doggone Brazilian or I'm half Mexican when everybody originated from Africa. See, science, as you know it, is bullshit, people. When you start researching this stuff for yourself, you'll realize we've been bamboozled. Now let's move on. Everybody know that the oldest literate civilization in Africa is the pharaonic civilization of ancient Egypt. Historical records date the rise of the Egyptian state to about 3300 BC and the fall from influence at 343 BC, making it one of the world's oldest and longest lasting civilizations. Now we got to touch a few things on that passage, y'all. Look at the time frames here. It say historical records date the rise of the Egyptian state to about 3300 BC, y'all. That's a long time. The Egyptian civilizations lasted thousands of years, y'all. And look at here. This is what I want to point out to y'all, especially you people who looked at my other lectures about Hellenism and my lectures about the Council of Nicaea. This gonna drive it home when I read this till you read this. It say that the Egyptian state fell from influence at 343 BC. Now look at my lecture about Hellenism and you'll see that's the time what Hellenism started, around that time when the Egyptian civilization fell. So what was going on? Egypt was being invaded, y'all, and it was being taken over by different cultures. So let's move on. And a little bit more to touch on what I'm telling you about these invasions. Check this out. Europeans first began exploring the northern coast of Africa around 332 BC, when Alexander the Great came into Egypt and established the city of Alexandria. The Roman Empire soon after began to integrate much of North Africa's Mediterranean coastline into the Roman system. So in other words, slowly but surely, the Egyptian civilization was dying and the Roman Empire was taking over. But we have to keep in mind that there was more empires besides the Romans who invaded and had an influence on Africa African culture. I just named to you a bunch of different religions. Christianity came from the Romans. And if you look at my lectures on Council of Nicaea and Hellenism, you can see how that came to be. But now let's move on here. While there are several different theories regarding the origin of the name Africa, most etymologists believe the name derived from Afri, the title for a group of people who dwelt in North Africa near Carthage around the 3rd century BC, and Ka, the Roman suffix for country or land. Okay, like I said, we can get into all the different names of Africa. It's so many, but that's really not important, y'all, long as we know what we talking about when we say Africa. Another word from Africa is Greek for sunny or without cold, because Africa sits on the equator, and as I told you recently, Africa don't have winters like every other continent. So the ancient people in this land was able to plant crops all year round, which is amazing, people. Now let's move on. This is something that's really gonna blow y'all mind. They say the African region of Ethiopia is featured prominently in several ancient Greek dramas and poems. The Greek poet Homer mentions Ethiopians in both the Iliad and the Odyssey as a blameless race and amongst the noblest of men. This is the Greek poet Homer. This is what he had to say about the Ethiopians, y'all. He said these people were a blameless race. Think about that a minute before I move on. Powerful, respected people, y'all. When we get back to embrace the greatness of Africa, we embrace the greatness of ourselves, people. Now let's move on. Let's talk about Africa's wealth and resources. Check these facts out that I'm about to tell to y'all. We're going to talk about Africa's wealth and resources right here. Check these facts out right here. The combined purchasing power of black people in the United States, Sub-Saharan Africa, and CARICOM member states is $3.2 trillion. I'm going to stop and let you think about that again. The combined purchasing power of black people in the United States, Sub-Saharan Africa, and CARICOM is $3.2 trillion. Wow. And guess what's so deep about it, y'all? That $3.2 trillion pales in comparison to the fortune in Africa's natural resources. So that $3.2 trillion is just in paper money. We got way more than that in natural resources, y'all. It say Africa has approximately 30% of the Earth's remaining mineral resources. South Africa's total mineral reserves alone is estimated to be worth $2.5 trillion. The continent has the largest reserves of precious metals, with over 40% of the planet's gold reserves, over 60% of the cobalt, and 90% of the platinum reserves. Y'all, this is where all the resources reside. Now you see why all of these nations going into Africa and trying to keep us blind and keep us out of it. When the people on this earth wake up and see what's going on, we'll take control of these resources and we'll be able to sustain ourselves without being slaves to no superpowers, y'all. You shouldn't have to spend this money for water. You shouldn't have to go to work just to eat. And if you don't eat, you're going to starve to death. That ain't the way the Creator intended it, y'all. I'm putting this lecture out about Africa to show you the root of the world's problems, okay? I keep telling y'all, if the earth is a car, Africa is the steering wheel, and we ain't in the driving seat. Now, them the words of Broderick Sanchez Paris right there. Them the words of Brother Sanchez. I'm going to tell it to you again. If the earth was a car, Africa would be the steering wheel, and we ain't in the driver's seat. You just think about it a minute. Let's move on. Black nation states. Of the 193 member nations of the UN, 65 or just over 33% of them are predominantly black. In other words, if the UN were a democratic organization, black people would wield significant influence. What does that mean, y'all? Listen to me and I'm going to simplify it for you. It's 193 members of the United Nations, and 33% of those members are black nations. So we're talking about the whole UN is composed of African nations, y'all. Think about that for a minute. Out of 193 flags you see flying over the UN building, 33% of them are black nations. That's something to think about, people. Let's move on. So we're talking about human origins that can be traced back 4 and 5 million years ago on the continent of Africa. So any religion that think they can compete with that is straight up foolish, man. Let's move on. Okay, here's another fact that I want to bring up to y'all on African people. It say Asa G. Hilliard III, an African-American professor of educational psychology who worked on indigenous ancient African history, stated that all human beings are Africans and non-black human beings are demelanated Africans. That makes perfect sense, people. I keep telling y'all it's only two kind of people, colored and non-colored. However, we all make up the human family. There's different variations to each different version of African. For example, the black Africans over here in America, we thrive at hip hop, basketball, and a lot of most stuff. We have great qualities that are straight up unique just to us. And if you look at like Asian culture or Middle Eastern culture, each one of them has stuff that's unique to them. For example, when you go to the Middle Eastern, they have a desert culture over there that's straight up unique to them. When you start researching about Aladdin and the genie lamps and the belly dancing, and that's a beautiful culture. And then when you move on over to Asia, you're dealing with your martial arts, your spiritual arts of self-defense, which teach you how to hone the body and channel your energy for self-defense. But they always talk, right? Self-defense, people, not self-offense. You see, it was only to defend yourself, not to go start shit. So when you look at all of these traditions, they got respected practices that are very good for morality, y'all. So when we say that two types of Africans, melanated Africans and demelanated Africans, what are we talking about? White people what is what we call demelanated Africans. See, let me tell y'all something about nature. Nature got variations of all kind of species, and some may seem more dominant than others. A doggone lion may seem more dominant than a butterfly, but guess what, y'all? Both of them got their roles, and if you take either one of them off the planet, we'll all die. So let's stop looking at it from a standpoint of who's better and see what each one offers to the planet as a whole, people, because we one big family. Now, your demelanated Africans offered a lot to the planet. Yes, Europeans have a long history of destruction on the planet also, but every culture has a history of good and bad, okay? So I don't want to get into the blaming game. That's why I'm saying this stuff. I just wanted to throw that out to y'all that we all Africans. Melanated Africans or demelanated Africans. Guess what, y'all? I love all of my African brothers and sisters. The only thing that'll make me hate you is if you go against those African traditions and practices that we practice. That means you're not a true African, and us true Africans need to get rid of you. Because until true Africans rise back onto the planet, it's going to keep getting destroyed. And before you know it, it ain't going to be no earth. So let's keep moving on, y'all. Africa is not only the birthplace of humanity, it is also the birthplace of human civilization. Most people are aware of the pharaonic civilization of Egypt is one of the world's oldest and longest lasting. However, the nation of Ta-Seti predated Egyptian civilization. See, a lot of people don't know that. All we know is Egypt. But guess what, y'all? Egypt was children of Ta-Seti. What do I mean by that? Over here in America, these people over here get their power from Great Britain. In other words, America is a colony of Great Britain. Britain is the mother country and America is the son or the daughter continent. These group of people left Britain and came over here to start a nation of themselves called America, but they still represent their mother country called Britain. That's why both flags got the same colors, people. Why did I bring that up? Because when you look at Egypt, Egypt is the baby nation of Ta-Seti or Kush or Ethiopia. The first civilization was in Ethiopia, y'all, and you had a group of people from Ethiopia migrate and make their own civilization, and they called it Egypt. So Egypt is the child of Ethiopia. Let's move on. So we said that the Egyptian dynasty was around 3300 BC, and even before that, what we have here in this passage here from the New York Times on March 1st, 1979 by Boyce Rensberger. It's a headline called Nubian Roman monarchy called oldest. And this is what the man wrote. He said, evidence of the oldest recognizable monarchy in human history, preceding the rise of the earliest Egyptian kings by several generations, has been discovered in artifacts from ancient Nubia, or what you call Ethiopia. He estimated that the first kings of Ta-Seti, or what we call Nubia or Ethiopia, may well have ruled about 5900 BC. So we going even further back now. I just told you 3300 BC with Egypt. We talking about the people who they come from back in Nubia was around 5900 BC. Keep in mind, we saying BC, y'all. That means before any of these religions that's on the planet today. So keep that in mind. And they was thriving, okay, without no religions, in harmony with the planet, people. Now let's move on. This something I want to point out to y'all. The Sahara Desert is the size of America, y'all. But this what I want you to point out to that. It wasn't always a desert. The Sahara Desert used to be a fertile area that you can plant crops on and all of that. All of these invasions messed the land up, y'all. Africa's suffering. That's why the earth's suffering. Now check this out. By 5000 BC, farming was somewhat common in the northern areas of Africa, as people were growing crops and herding livestock. See, these people were sustaining themselves off the land, y'all. But then it said during this time, the Sahara Desert was fertile. Why it ain't fertile now, y'all? I just explained to y'all what Monsanto did. This stuff been going on for years, messing up the land to get the people from being self-sustaining. This is how you conquer a people, y'all. Now, them people was farming in Africa, growing crops and herding livestock. Now they poor as hell, depending on these governments to feed them. Let's move on. Egyptians developed mathematics, medicine, irrigation, and agricultural production techniques, writing, and the first ships. In other words, the Egyptians left a lasting legacy upon the world. That's deep, y'all. If it wasn't for the ancient Egyptians, we wouldn't even know how to add and subtract right now. If it wasn't for the ancient Egyptians, we wouldn't have no mathematics. And we sure ain't got the kind of mathematics that they had, because we can't build them pyramids how they did it. We still baffled. And it's just sad, y'all, that we don't give homage to these ancient people who gave us civilization as we know it today. Now check it out. If it wasn't for Egyptians, we wouldn't have math. We wouldn't have medicine. We wouldn't have irrigation or agriculture. We wouldn't have writing, and there wouldn't be nobody sailing around these oceans in those ships, because all of this stuff started in Egypt, y'all, which is in Africa. Now let's move on. The Egyptians continued to spread their culture across northern Africa, and kingdoms were created in Ethiopia and Sudan. The then growing Roman Empire continued to expand its influence, and in 30 BC, Egypt became a province of Rome. See what I'm talking about here? In 30 BC, Egypt became under Roman rule, y'all. Let's move on. Before the Middle Ages began, the Roman Empire collapsed, and the Arabs quickly took their place on the continent. So Rome ruled it from about 30 BC to around the time the Middle Ages began, before the Middle Ages began. It said when the Roman Empire collapsed, because they had took over Egypt. But when they collapsed, instead of the Egyptians picking themselves back up and reestablishing it for Egypt, it said, man, when the Roman Empire collapsed, the Arabs didn't waste no time getting in there to take it over. So when the Romans left out, our Arab brothers and sisters came and took over and invaded our land and enslaved us once again, y'all. Listen, in case y'all don't know, Egypt is the most invaded continent on the history of the planet because of all these resources that I discussed to you in this lecture and all this knowledge that they had. And they still going over there to this day, raping the land of all its knowledge and resources. Let's move on. It says soon kingdoms emerged in Africa. They traded with the Arabs using gold plus a valuable commodity, slaves. One of the first kingdoms was Ghana. And we know that Ghana still got the people enslaved today. If you look at Ghana today, it produced more oil than any of them other African continents. And this what I just read to you explains why. Because Ghana was one of the first kingdoms, y'all. That's why when you look at Ghana today, the government rich as hell, but them people are poor as hell. Just see, look, Ghana was one of the first black African kingdoms, y'all, that started enslaving under the Arab trading system. So I'm going to do some more lectures on all of this to show y'all how all of this came about, and I'm going to go into detail with this. See, when the Arabs took over, they set up trades. They started using these resources. And not only did they have all of the natural resources, but they also had the people resources, which back then they called slaves, y'all. So when the Arabs went in after the Romans left, man, they established kingdoms with this trade system. And Ghana was one of those first kingdoms. And if you look at Ghana today, you can see why it's the way it is based on what I just said. Now let's move on. This is something I want to point out to you with everything that's been said. That's pretty much the end of this lecture. I'm going to end it right here. But before I leave, y'all, I just want to say I appreciate each and every last one of you for listening. I love you. And the reason I do these is because knowledge is power, people. Knowledge is truly power. They say what you don't know won't hurt you. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie, y'all. They said what you don't know won't hurt you, but that's a lie, y'all. What you don't know will actually kill you. For example, if I blindfold you and start taking your hand to lead you and you can't see nothing, and I walk you off of a cliff and you fall down the cliff and die, then guess what, y'all? What you didn't know just killed you. Now, had you known a cliff was there, you would be alive. So I'm saying that to show y'all that just because some sound good don't make it true. For years, we have said what you don't know won't hurt you. But y'all, that's a lie, man. That's a straight up lie. If you finna have sex with a person unprotected and you don't know they got AIDS, then what you don't know is gonna kill you, my brother. We gotta wake up, people. And with that being said, what we have failed to know has been killing us, y'all, for the past thousands of years as humanity. Our ignorance has been killing us. The stuff we don't know, y'all, is what keeps these other people rich, man. Our ignorance is what keeps these people in power, man. Knowledge is power, people. So I ain't gonna keep y'all all day because this was a very long lecture. Again, I appreciate you for watching. Go back through this lecture and then research yourself. I love y'all. Thanks for watching. Peace.